Good day, viewers, and welcome to another program of Political Scope. My name is Stacey Carmichael James, and with me today is Presidential Advisor on Community Development, Mr. Odinga Lumumba. Mr. Lumumba, it's a pleasure having you on Political Scope today.
Thank you.
And now today, before we get into the nitty-gritty of discussing community development, could you give us an overview of some of the projects, developments that have taken place under this government?
Well, first of all, we need to understand what is community development. Community development is geared towards is activities geared towards enhancing the status of a community, a particular community. And again, example, I like to take Buxton because I was born in Buxton. When we came to power, there were absence of many social activities in Buxton. And the infrastructure was not well done, or there was an absence of modern infrastructure. Like, example, the roads were inadequate. The water system was almost nil. People had to travel long distances for water. Or if they don't travel long distances for water, only a certain period of the day or night they would have access to water, either because of lack of power or lack of any transmission system that was functional. The school system was problematic. The schools were old, they were run down. There was no lack of books in the schools, and the health centers were non-functional. There was no community center, absence of community center. The playground was in disarray. There was bottles and bricks and no proper fence. So these elements that I've mentioned, these are the things that cause a community to be effective. So we had to go about fixing that. For example, if you pass now, you see a modern building named Tipperary Hall. We constructed that for well over $50 million. So now people can have public meetings, they can have weddings, they can have dances, they can have lessons, they have classes, they can have musical activities. We also had to put together a water system. Now today you can have water in Buxton, not only in your yard, but also in your house, in your homes. The playground is now functional. The fence is up. You have a basketball court. You have one or two small pavilions. The health center is functional. You have doctors there from time to time. You have nurses there permanently. You have a tarmac where people from the back dam or the farmers, small farmers, can come and bring their goods on weekends to sell to the community or to passerbys. So in essence, the village office is now repaired, fully repaired. And so before the village office was almost down. I think it was rotten, you couldn't climb the steps. So there are a series of activities that will cause a community to be enhanced. And that's an example. We can skip Buxton, we can go to Linden, for example. Linden was very similarities. The road system was in disarray. The water was brown or gray. There was no proper housing. And we went about correcting those situations. For example, I think we have distributed thousands of house lots in Linden, but not just the distribution. The social climate has caused people to build, either reconstruct or rehabilitate or build brand new houses, in particular in the Amelia Ward. The water system, we have put in a purification plant in Linden. We have built a new hospital, as you know, at Wisma, at Linden. We built a new hospitals. We have built some new schools. So all those things and we have built several basketball courts. Because you cannot deal with enhancement of the community and don't deal with youths and sports and culture. So we have done that too. In most communities we have done. Either we fix and if you recall, Prime Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, Frank Anthony, he has for the last 3-4 years, he has used about $200-300 million of the budget, from the national budget, to give to communities for small projects. Any community can apply for either you fix a fence, you fix your ground, or you repair a small building. And we have used that effectively to enhance communities, in particular what it got to do with young people. So those are basically the kind of projects we have done in terms of community-based projects. So those are in a nutshell, those are the kind of things we function.
Okay. Now you touched on community development. They state that the government met certain communities and how it has improved. Could you highlight a few of the programs that the government has that are specifically geared towards community advancement or development?
Well, let's give you an example. I think I went through that before in my analysis, that I pointed out that some of the programs have to be based on what we've done in terms of the develop the social infrastructure. And one of our biggest area of emphasis has been housing. The, the state of housing was in a terrible condition when we came into power. Terrible condition. There were like 20 people, in some cases, 20, 25 people living in one homes. Houses were run down. And there were several reasons to that. For the last 15 years of it, there was absence of any proper distribution program for house lots in this country. That was one reason. The second reason, the interest rate was remarkably very high, over 30%. So even if one wants to build a home or wants to repair a home, the interest rate was extremely high. Then wages and salaries were too low. So one of the biggest things for us in community development was in the developing community in the sense of repairing and fixing the housing stock, improvement in housing. If you go from community to community today, whether it be the East Coast or whether it be Essequibo, whether it be Berbice or the East Bank, you're seeing spanking new houses. You see large number of housing schemes where there are hundreds of new homes, whether it be Tushan, whether it be Parfait Harmony, whether it be Diamond, whether it be Bush Lot, wherever you go. And these are examples of community development. We have built brand new communities, and we have taken old historical communities and rejuvenated them by providing access to housing and access to low interest housing, low interest loans. For example, in most banks, for $4 or $5 million, you can get 4 or 5, 6, I think 4 to 6% interest rate. Also, new building society. So those are fun. And to go with that, I think when we started initially, there was such a rush for housing that we never had time to do the infrastructure properly or adequately. Now when you go into the housing area, we do the roads, we brought in electricity, we brought in water, and we now put in the recreational facilities together. So we built, and these communities have schools now. You go to Tushan, and Parfait Harmony, they have modern, huge schools that can accommodate the community as a whole. So those are an example of things that we have done in precisely. We can talk also about electricity. The communities, for example, never had electricity in this country. And that's a big aspect of community development. You can't deal with modernization and deal with a modern world and people don't have access to electricity and water. When we came into power, this country was in a high state of backwardness. We were probably similar to some of the most backward countries in Africa, or worse than Haiti. That there are large amount of communities, numerous communities, had no access to electricity. When I say no access, I'm not talking about blackout. No electricity, no water. Over 90% of our communities now today have access to potable water and have access to electricity. Recently in the area around in New Amsterdam area, there's some people who did not have electricity close to New Amsterdam for like 20, 30 years.
I think that would be Angois Avenue.
Angois Avenue.
Yes.
The Prime Minister just opened that scheme. This government has just given them access to electricity. There's no God-given reason why a decent dozens of human beings in a modern city, a modern town, shouldn't have access to electricity. We had the will to provide it, and we have done that. And if you go around in these villages, you also see, in addition to that, we have added an additionality to the social infrastructure. We have improved the playgrounds. We have put in basketball courts. In some cases, through Project Youth Choice, we built community centers, such as in Rosal Town, whether it be Blairmont, These are places where we put in brand new community centers, and we have improved some buildings in Essequibo, for example. We have rebuilt the building in Queenstown, Essequibo. We've done repair and the one in Dartmouth, Essequibo. These are just examples I'm giving from the top of my head. But in every region, we have taken steps to improve the livelihood of the citizens.
Thank you. Now we've touched on some communities on the coast. We've touched on the Essequibo coast. Now, could we touch on areas in the hinterland? How has the government developed communities within the hinterland?
Well, again, and these are good questions. For years, we have had a tendency to treat our Amerindian brothers and sisters as third-class citizens, not even second-class citizens, third-class citizens. They lacked access to education. They lacked access to potable water. They lack access to proper health services, and they lack access to the tools of civilization. When we came into power, we understood and recognized that one of the fundamental priorities for any good government is to have equality throughout the regions and to ensure that every race functions on a level playing field. If you want to bring one race to the level of another, you have to put in the infrastructure. And the most fundamental aspect of an infrastructure to do that is education. So what we have done, we have built dozens of schools in the Amerindian communities. And in cases where schools could not be built in a specific community, we have a system of dormitories. So we can move the young people from one community to another community so they can have access to school, but also a place to stay, and they can have meals. So when they leave their parents' homes, they're well protected and they're well taken care of. But that's not enough. In many areas, we have improved the lives of the Amerindian communities. For example, we now provide, in some areas, we're giving them access to laptops. But that comes because we have introduced solar energy in many communities. Because, as you know, GPL has not yet reached those communities. We were trying to do that through the Amelia's Hydro Dam, Hydro Falls, but the opposition, as you know, canned that program. So the only option we have now is to help them with solar energy. And through that, the laptops can be functional in some communities. But education, like I said earlier, is very fundamental. And they have been beneficiaries to the scholarship program, in particular in Cuba. Many Amerindians are now studying to be doctors and medical technicians. And we have several programs that allows them to be trained teachers so they can go back to their communities and become teachers. Because nothing is better than you have in your own community, coming back in a positive manner to instill education and instill growth and development to that particular community. We also now, presently, we're doing a Dharma million dollar. They'll take in another couple hundred Amerindian brothers and sisters. We also have scholarship programs for Amerindian University of Guyana through the Public Service Ministry. So in many ways, what we have done is found a mechanism to cultivate the development and growth of the Amerindian community. We're now improving the airstrips so the Amerindians can have access to the other communities. They can travel much more free, and we can do that also. So the communities are no longer isolated. We have strengthened the Amerindian Act to ensure that these communities can have their rights. And we don't want to see them as reservations, but see them as homesteads and see them as legal entities where they can control their own destiny, in particular in mining and agriculture. And we have strengthened the Amerindian Act while we're in power. And we've ensured that they're no longer abused. Years ago, Amerindians were abused, and there was no social justice or criminal justice. Now, we have a lot of intervention schemes to ensure that doesn't happen. And so those kind of abuses has become non-functional.
Thank you. Now, we spoke at length about community development and how um, certain villages in Amerindian communities as well as coastal areas have developed. Could you tell us or explain to us, Mr. Lumumba, how does this development of a community translate into individual advancement?
Well, it's 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 a philosophical thing, but it's also real. If you live in a community that doesn't have a school and doesn't have teachers, then you're going to languish in certain level of illiteracy because there's no one there to teach you or to tell you what is correct or tell you how to become part of the modern world. So that translation of community development comes in the form of ensuring that the necessary infrastructure is in place, whether it be schools, whether it be medical facilities. Let's give an example of medical facilities. If the medical facility is in place, then the lifespan of people, in particular Amerindian people or all people, will be longer. If your lifespan was 30 or 40 years without medical facilities, now that you have medical facilities, your lifespan will go up to 40, 50, maybe 60 years. Access to food, with education and with training, and particularly in the area of agriculture, your farming methods we can become more scientific. Therefore, there'll be more available food stuff, more available agricultural products, not only to enhance your eating habits, but also for trade. So you can now become an economic factor in your community. You can plant different things, agricultural products, whether it be plantains, bananas, whether it be ground provisions, whether it be vegetables. And also with training and access to education, your fishing methods will change also. You take a more scientific approach to fishing. That means there'll be more fish for the community and also be more fish available for sell or to do trade, whether it be barter or whether it be some form of basic and modern sale to the mining community. So access to infrastructure development creates a more developed human being, creates a more education, a brighter human being, a more industrious human being, one who's more creative. And creativity brings development. Because once you become creative, you think about positive things to do, whether you open a small business, whether you decide to migrate and go into Georgetown or maybe London or New Amsterdam, maybe you decide to branch off. Instead of just farming in your backyard, maybe you decide that you want 10 or 15 acres of land and you can plant rice or do something entirely different. So access to community development and access to the enhancement of a community leads to development of a human being, makes him a stronger mentally, a more educational human being. And once you're more educational and once you're brighter, once you've seen the world differently, then you do things differently. You improve your lifestyle.
That's true. That's true. And could you say what are some of the plans of the PPP government moving forward for the continuance of this community
Well,
development?
there are a couple things that we didn't do that we have to do. I think one of the most fundamental things for the government next time around is to create the atmosphere that will allow growth in employment. We have an unemployment problem. And employment, the biggest impact on reducing unemployment worldwide is to get the manufacturing industry moving. There are several things to manufacturing. Manufacturing industry requires a bright person, not a university type person necessarily, but a bright person, that's one, and a hard worker. In Guyana, we have bright people and we have hard workers. But they need more than that. They need cheap electricity. There's an area in America, the Pacific Northwest, when they introduced hydropower, unemployment reduced significantly, business, in particular small business, grew significantly. Let's take an example, a company, a clothing company, a large clothing firm worldwide that sold jeans, for example, decide that they want to come to Guyana to do their business. The reason they would have left Europe or America is because of economic conditions, in particular salaries, union fees, transportation costs, might be extremely high. They can come to countries like Guyana, developing or underdeveloped countries like Guyana, where it might be easier for them to function, less rules and regulations. What rules and regulations must be in place? But they were looking for a reason to come. And most time that reason is reduction of cost of operation. And the biggest aspect of that cost of operation in most instances is the cost of it. Production cost is electricity cost. That's why the hydro project is so important to us, not as a government, but as a nation. If we can get the hydro dam, if we can have a working relationship with the opposition, and we can approve the hydropower dam for Guyana, and we can bring down the cost of electricity by 20 to 30%, then we're in a position to develop our local industries, to make some of our local industries compatible with international rules and regulations, make them more functional. But the biggest thing for us is that we will be able to attract large manufacturing companies, especially those in the area of clothing. So that's key. So that's big for us. Secondly, we have done great work in the area of housing. Great work. We have distributed house lots. We have built a road network, but we still have congestion. We need to open up our byways and causeways. We need more highways. We need to make it easier for people to travel from Georgetown to Timeri, from the East Coast to Diamond. And we, as you probably have seen, the president came back from India and revealed that I think $50 million or above will be made available by the Indian government for do a bypass road. So transportation is very important for us. The interior, opening the interior is the future of Guyana, in addition to manufacturing. We have to get transportation or better highways or better roadways to the interior so we can make mining cheaper. Not only the accessibility to mining areas, but the production costs must go down. The price of gold is going down. That will have an impact on us unless we carry down the production costs so we can remain competitive. Social services needs to be improved. That's another area we're going to work on. We have trained 600 to 800 doctors in Cuba thanks to the Cuban government. Now, the management of the health system is a priority for us. We have got enough. We can still do some more health centers and hospitals. We've got enough doctors. We're training more nurses. The management now is the task. We have all these things. Guyana, we're still a relatively new society. Some of these things are new to us. So now we have to manage it. We have to put the management system together to ensure that even though we have the drugs available, that they get to the various facilities in a timely manner. Even though we have enough doctors available, we have to ensure the doctors are placed in the various locations in a timely manner. So when our citizens go to the health centers and the community hospitals, they don't see a need to come to public hospital. We have to do those things. Young people. We have to, the emphasis must be on jobs. I spoke to you on that earlier, that there's a nexus between manufacturing, cheap electricity, and creation of employment. But while the young people are waiting for these jobs, we have to find them things to do. We have to get them active in a positive way. The government is proposing 3 more sports halls like the one we have in Homestretch Avenue. We want to do one in Linden, want to do one in Region 6, and want to do one in Essequibo Coast. So we can expand on horizons. People from Essequibo and Berbice and Linden don't have to come to Georgetown to get involved in a national activity. We're going to build facilities in these areas. In every village, we're going to ensure that there's something meaningful for young people to do. We've already done that in most villages. We'll continue. Village like number 5. Many villages are earmarked for either basketball courts, bleachers, community centers, sanitary blocks. You know, you go in an area, a community, even here in Georgetown sometimes. Let's take a football ground. And you ask why people not coming to the games. You know, you have a single mother. She has 2 children. She want to go and see a football game or take them to participate in the game. There's no sanitary facilities. That's a big issue. Well, we're working on a program to put adequate type of sanitary facilities in most of our grounds and most of our recreation facilities, so parents can feel comfortable taking the children to these activities, and they themselves can feel comfortable when they go and take the children to these facilities. So we're working on things with youths. We're working for things to develop the communities. We intend to expand the things to the elderly more. You know, we have a program where we give them, I think it's $20,000 a year to help with their electricity bill. Subsidy. Already they don't have to pay any water bill once you retire. You know, we have children in school. We have a uniform program. We have free school books, textbooks. So many things like that we're going to do. I think we've been talking to some stakeholders, including the opposition. They've mentioned a few things to us. And one thing we're going to look at is we won't go back to national service. We don't think that's good for the country. We think that's a form of dictatorship. But we want to look at a kind of a program that where young people can come and serve and work, get training, and get some form of stipend. Some system, it's complex. We have not nailed it down yet, but we're looking at some kind of work program so that our unemployed, while they're waiting for substantive employment, they can participate in a meaningful activity, learning some form of trade. We already have the BIT program and many programs through the Ministry of Labor. We want to do an expanded program, a massive program, to get our young people involved in something. One thing we're going to look at, in particular in communities, in villages, we tried it before, we weren't too successful, so we have to take another approach to it. How we get the farmers in the villages to expand their activity, how to get them to more meaningful activity. We have tremendous amount of fertile land at the back of most villages. We have a canal system. We have to make those things functional, operational. We must be able to ensure that the farmer can plant his ground provisions and his kitchen and his vegetables and bring them to a market, or find some mechanism that we can guarantee that these items can be sold and he can receive an adequate amount of income for his family. So those are the kind of things we're going to look at in the new year, in the new term.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Lumumba. In the interest of time, we'll have to cut off here, but I do look forward to another program of Political Scope where we could delve into more on community development. It was a pleasure having you today, and we look forward to another
Well,
interview.
all my explanations have been useful.
Yes, they have been.
Thank you.
Very much. And thank you so much, viewers, for joining us. My name is Stacey Carmichael James. With me today was Presidential Advisor on Community Development, Mr. Odinga Lumumba. Thank you for joining us.